William had always believed his life was ordinary. At 32, he worked as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Chicago. His days followed the same routine: wake up at 7, grab coffee from the corner shop, take the subway to work, code for 8 hours, and return home to his quiet apartment. He lived alone, had few close friends, and spent most evenings reading technical books or watching documentaries. Catherine was the bright spot in his otherwise predictable world. They had met 2 years ago at a coffee shop near his office. She was sitting alone, reading a thick novel, her dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the large windows. Something about her peaceful presence drew him in. When she accidentally knocked over her coffee cup, William rushed to help her clean up the mess. Their eyes met. She smiled, and that simple moment changed everything. Catherine worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She had a warm laugh and kind eyes that seemed to understand people without them having to explain themselves. William found himself looking forward to their evening phone calls and weekend walks through Lincoln Park. She had a way of making even the most mundane activities feel special. When they watched movies together, she would point out small details in the background that he never noticed. When they cooked dinner, she would tell him stories from her childhood in a small town in Iowa. Their relationship had grown steadily over the past 18 months. William had even started thinking about proposing. He had saved up enough money for a ring and had been planning the perfect moment to ask her. Catherine often talked about wanting a simple life, a small house with a garden where she could grow vegetables, maybe a dog, and eventually children. William shared these dreams and felt grateful to have found someone who wanted the same quiet happiness he craved. But lately, something felt different. Catherine had been acting strange for the past few weeks. She would get mysterious phone calls that made her step outside or go to another room. When William asked who was calling, she would give vague answers like, "just work stuff," or "an old friend." Her phone was always face down when they were together, and she had started using a password that she never shared with him. William tried to push away his growing concerns. He told himself that everyone deserved privacy and that he was probably overthinking things. Catherine was still affectionate and caring, but there were moments when she seemed distant, lost in thoughts she didn't share. Sometimes he would catch her staring out the window with a worried expression, and when he asked what was wrong, she would quickly smile and say everything was fine. The first real sign that something was seriously wrong came on a Tuesday evening in October. William had planned to surprise Catherine by cooking her favorite pasta dish. He arrived at her apartment an hour earlier than usual, using the spare key she had given him months ago. As he quietly entered her apartment, he heard her voice coming from the bedroom. She was speaking in hushed, urgent tones. William stood in the hallway, grocery bags in his hands, unsure whether to announce his presence or leave quietly. He had never intentionally eavesdropped on Catherine before, but something in her tone made him pause. She sounded stressed, maybe even scared. "I can't keep doing this," he heard her say. "It's been 2 years and I'm tired of lying to him. He's a good man, and he doesn't deserve this." William's heart began to race. Who was she talking to? What lies was she referring to? He moved closer to the bedroom door, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. "I know what we agreed, but things have changed," Catherine continued. "I care about him more than I expected to. This whole thing has gone too far." There was a long pause, and William realized she was listening to someone on the other end of the phone. His mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was she having an affair? Was their entire relationship built on some kind of deception? "No, I won't do that to him," Catherine said firmly. "I'm done. Find someone else for your project." Project? William felt confused and frightened. What kind of project involved lying to him for 2 years? He heard movement in the bedroom and quickly backed away from the door, moving toward the kitchen. By the time Catherine emerged from the bedroom, William was standing by the counter, unpacking groceries with shaking hands. "William," Catherine said, clearly startled. "I didn't expect you so early." "I wanted to surprise you," he managed to say, studying her face carefully. She looked pale and nervous, nothing like the calm, confident woman he thought he knew. "That's sweet of you," she said, but her smile seemed forced. "I was just on a call with work. There's been some drama with the scheduling?" William nodded, but the explanation felt hollow. In all the time they had been together, Catherine had never taken work calls in her bedroom with the door closed. Hospital scheduling issues didn't require secretive conversations about lies and projects. They cooked dinner together that evening, but the usual easy conversation felt strained. Catherine seemed distracted, checking her phone frequently and giving short answers to William's questions. When he asked about her day, she provided the same generic responses she always gave. Busy shift, difficult patients, too much paperwork. But now these answers felt rehearsed, as if she was reciting lines from a script. After dinner, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, William found himself studying Catherine's profile in the flickering light from the television. He realized how little he actually knew about her life outside of their relationship. She rarely talked about specific coworkers or patients. She never invited him to hospital events or introduced him to colleagues. When he asked to see photos from her childhood, she always said they were packed away in storage. Over the next few days, William became more observant. He noticed that Catherine's stories about her hometown in Iowa were sometimes inconsistent. Once she said she grew up on a farm, another time she mentioned living in the downtown area of a small city. When he pointed out the contradiction, she laughed it off and said she had lived in several places as a child because her father's work required frequent moves. William also began to pay closer attention to the mysterious phone calls. They seemed to follow a pattern. Always in the evening, always requiring Catherine to leave the room, and always leaving her tense and distracted afterward. When he suggested they spend a quiet evening with their phones turned off, Catherine became anxious and said she needed to be available in case the hospital had an emergency. But the most disturbing discovery came when William decided to do something he had never done before. He followed Catherine after one of her mysterious appointments. She had told him she was going to a mandatory training session at the hospital on a Saturday morning. This seemed unusual since Catherine had never mentioned weekend training before, and she had seemed nervous when she told him about it. William parked across the street from the hospital and waited. He felt guilty about spying on his girlfriend, but his growing suspicions had become impossible to ignore. After an hour, he realized Catherine's car wasn't in the hospital parking lot. He drove around the surrounding area and eventually spotted her car outside a small office building downtown, nowhere near the hospital. Through the large windows of the building, William could see Catherine sitting at a table with two other people, a man in a business suit and a woman with short gray hair. They appeared to be having a serious conversation, looking at documents spread across the table. Catherine looked uncomfortable, occasionally shaking her head or gesturing emphatically. William sat in his car, watching this scene unfold, feeling as if his world was crashing down around him. Whatever was happening in that office, it had nothing to do with nursing or hospital training. Catherine was clearly involved in something she had been hiding from him for their entire relationship. When Catherine emerged from the building an hour later, she looked drained and upset. William quickly drove away, making sure to arrive home before she did. When she returned to his apartment that afternoon, she told him the training had been boring, but necessary. She seemed tired and distracted, and when William asked if she wanted to talk about her day, she said she just wanted to forget about work and focus on spending time with him. That evening, as Catherine slept beside him, William lay awake staring at the ceiling. The woman he thought he knew and loved was apparently living a double life. The caring, honest nurse who shared his dreams of a simple future was involved in some kind of secretive arrangement that she described as a project involving lies and deception. William realized he had to make a choice. He could confront Catherine directly and demand the truth, but he worried she would simply tell him more lies. He could try to forget what he had discovered and hope that whatever secret she was keeping wouldn't affect their relationship. Or he could investigate further and try to uncover the truth himself. The next morning, William made his decision. He needed to know who Catherine really was and what she had been hiding from him. If their relationship had any chance of surviving, it would have to be built on honesty, not on whatever elaborate deception had been controlling their lives for the past 2 years. As Catherine left for work, giving him the same sweet kiss goodbye that she always did, William began planning his investigation. He would start by trying to verify the basic facts of Catherine's life, her job, her background, her family in Iowa. If those turned out to be lies, he would know that everything he believed about their relationship was false. William had no idea that his search for the truth would lead him to discoveries far more shocking and dangerous than he could ever have imagined. The woman he loved was indeed keeping secrets, but they were connected to a world of deception and manipulation that would threaten not only their relationship, but their lives. William started his investigation carefully, not wanting to alert Catherine to his suspicions. He began with simple internet searches, looking for any trace of Catherine's background that he could verify independently. What he found immediately troubled him. Catherine had told him she graduated from nursing school at the University of Iowa, but when William searched the university's alumni directory, he couldn't find any record of a Catherine Morrison graduating from their nursing program in the years she had claimed. He tried variations of her name and checked nearby schools, but came up empty. It was possible the records weren't complete online, but the absence of any trace was concerning. Next, William decided to visit Catherine's workplace. He had never actually been inside the hospital where she claimed to work. Every time he offered to pick her up after a shift or bring her lunch, Catherine would insist on meeting him outside or at a nearby restaurant. She always said the hospital had strict visitor policies and preferred to keep her work and personal life separate. On a Thursday afternoon, William took time off from his own job and drove to Mercy General Hospital. He approached the information desk and asked to speak with Catherine Morrison in the nursing department. The elderly volunteer behind the desk consulted her computer and then looked up with a confused expression. "I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name working here," she said kindly. "Are you sure you have the right hospital?" William felt his stomach drop. "Could you check again? She's been working here for several years. She's a registered nurse. About 28 years old, dark hair." The volunteer checked again, even calling the nursing supervisor to be certain. After a few minutes, she confirmed that no Catherine Morrison worked at Mercy General Hospital, and hadn't for at least the past 5 years that their records covered. Walking back to his car in a daze, William tried to process this information. Catherine left their apartment every morning wearing scrubs, carrying a nurse's bag, and came home with stories about patients and medical procedures. If she wasn't working at the hospital, where was she going every day? What was she really doing for 8 to 10 hours? That evening, William struggled to act normally around Catherine. She came home at her usual time, looking tired and complaining about a difficult day with demanding patients. She showered and changed clothes, just as she always did, but now William watched her routine with new eyes. Were the scrubs just a costume? Was the fatigue an act? Over dinner, William decided to test Catherine with some gentle questions about her work. He asked about the nursing supervisor, wondering if she would mention someone who actually existed at the hospital. "Oh, Janet is having a tough time with the new computer system," Catherine said without hesitation. "She's been working here for 20 years and isn't used to all this technology." William nodded, but made a mental note to check if there was actually a supervisor named Janet at Mercy General. He was beginning to realize that Catherine was an accomplished liar, able to create believable details on the spot. The next day, William called the hospital again and asked to speak with Janet in the nursing department. Once again, he was told that no one by that name worked there. Catherine wasn't just using a fake workplace. She was creating an entire fictional world, complete with made-up colleagues and imaginary situations. William's investigation took on new urgency. He began following Catherine more systematically, taking vacation days to track her movements. What he discovered was a complex pattern that suggested Catherine's deception was far more elaborate than he had imagined. Most days, Catherine would drive to a small office building in a business district about 15 minutes from the hospital. She would park in a designated spot and enter through a side door using what appeared to be a key card. The building housed several small businesses, a marketing firm, an accounting office, and a few other companies with generic names that revealed little about their actual purpose. William spent hours sitting in his car, watching the building and noting who came and went. Catherine's schedule was consistent. She arrived around 8 in the morning and left between 5 and 6 in the evening, just like someone with a regular office job. But what was she doing in there? And why had she been lying to him about being a nurse? After several days of surveillance, William noticed that Catherine often met with the same two people he had seen her with during the supposed training session, the man in the business suit and the woman with gray hair. They would sometimes have lunch together at a nearby restaurant, and their conversations always appeared serious and intense. William decided to take a more direct approach. He researched the businesses in the building and discovered that one of them, listed simply as Strategic Consulting Services, had no website and very little public information available. The business registration showed it had been established 3 years ago, around the time Catherine would have started her deception. Growing bolder, William decided to try to enter the building. He waited until Catherine's car wasn't in the parking lot, then walked to the main entrance and tried to follow someone inside. The lobby was small and unremarkable, with a directory listing the various businesses. Strategic Consulting Services was listed on the 3rd floor. William took the elevator up and found himself in a carpeted hallway with several office doors. Most had clear signs identifying law firms and marketing companies, but the door for Strategic Consulting Services had only a small, discreet nameplate. William tried the door handle and found it locked. As he stood in the hallway trying to decide his next move, he heard voices coming from inside the office. One of them was definitely Catherine's voice, though he couldn't make out the words. She was speaking with someone, and the tone sounded like a business meeting rather than casual conversation. William pressed his ear to the door, hoping to hear more, but the conversation was too muffled. After a few minutes, he heard movement inside and quickly walked back toward the elevator. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of Catherine emerging from the office, looking in his direction with what might have been recognition. That evening, Catherine seemed more tense than usual. She asked William about his day with unusual interest, wanting to know where he had gone and what he had done. When he mentioned taking a drive around the city during his lunch break, she asked for specific details about where he had driven. Her questions felt like an interrogation disguised as casual conversation. William realized that Catherine might have seen him at the building, or someone might have told her that a stranger had been asking questions. He decided to be more careful with his investigation, but he was also more determined than ever to discover the truth. The breakthrough came when William decided to search Catherine's apartment more thoroughly. He had a key and knew her schedule, so he could safely spend time there when she was definitely at her mysterious job. He had always respected her privacy before, but the lies had destroyed his trust. In Catherine's bedroom closet, hidden behind a box of winter clothes, William found a small fireproof safe. It wasn't locked, perhaps because Catherine never expected him to look for it. Inside, he discovered documents that made his blood run cold. There were multiple identification cards with Catherine's photo, but different names. Driver's licenses for Catherine Walsh, Catherine Davis, and Catherine Stevens. Credit cards and bank statements under various names. And most shocking of all, a detailed file containing information about William himself, his full name, address, work history, financial information, family background, and even personal details like his favorite foods and childhood memories that he had shared with Catherine during intimate conversations. The file was labeled Subject Profile, William Chen, and appeared to be part of a larger project. There were notes in Catherine's handwriting describing William's personality, his daily routines, his hopes and fears. It read like a psychological assessment written by someone studying him rather than loving him. At the bottom of the file, William found a document that explained everything. It was a contract between Catherine Morrison, apparently her real name, and Strategic Consulting Services. The contract outlined Catherine's assignment to establish a romantic relationship with William Chen, maintain that relationship for a minimum of 2 years, and gather detailed intelligence about his personal and professional life. The contract specified that Catherine was to be paid a substantial monthly fee for this assignment, with bonuses for achieving certain milestones like moving in together or gaining access to William's work computer. The ultimate goal of the project wasn't specified in the documents William found, but it was clear that he had been the target of an elaborate con game from the very beginning. William sat on Catherine's bedroom floor, surrounded by the evidence of her deception, feeling as if his entire reality had collapsed. Every moment of their relationship had been a lie. Every kiss, every conversation, every plan they had made together, all of it had been part of Catherine's job. She was essentially a professional girlfriend, paid to manipulate him and gather information about his life. But why? William worked for a software company that developed database systems for small businesses. His job wasn't particularly important or sensitive. His family wasn't wealthy or influential. He couldn't understand why anyone would go to such elaborate lengths to spy on him. As William continued searching through Catherine's hidden documents, he found partial answers to his questions. There were references to his work on a project called Data Vault, which he recognized as a security system his company had developed for protecting sensitive information. There were also mentions of his college roommate, Marcus, who now worked for the Department of Defense, and his sister, Jennifer, who was an investigative journalist. William began to realize that the people targeting him might not be interested in him specifically, but in his connections to others or his access to certain information. Perhaps they thought he could provide access to his company's security software, or information about Marcus's defense work, or details about Jennifer's investigations. The scope of the deception was staggering. Catherine had spent 2 years learning everything about his life, earning his trust, and positioning herself to access his personal information and social connections. She had been trained to be the perfect girlfriend for him specifically, sharing his interests, supporting his dreams, and making him fall in love with a person who didn't really exist. William photographed all the documents with his phone, then carefully returned everything to the safe exactly as he had found it. He needed time to think about what to do with this information. Confronting Catherine directly might be dangerous if she was working for people who were willing to invest this much time and money in surveilling him. As he left Catherine's apartment, William felt emotionally devastated, but also strangely relieved. For weeks, he had sensed that something was wrong, that the woman he loved was hiding something important. Now he knew the truth, even though it was more horrible than anything he had imagined. The woman he had planned to marry was a stranger who had been paid to deceive him. Every memory of their relationship was tainted by the knowledge that Catherine's feelings had been fake, her responses calculated, her affection a performance designed to manipulate him. But William also felt a growing anger. Whoever was behind this had stolen 2 years of his life and violated his privacy in the most intimate way possible. They had turned his capacity for love into a weapon against him, and they had used Catherine to hurt him in ways he was only beginning to understand. That night, William lay in bed planning his next move. He could go to the police, but he wasn't sure if Catherine had actually broken any laws. He could confront her and demand answers, but that might put him in danger or allow the people behind the scheme to cover their tracks. He could try to investigate Strategic Consulting Services further and find out who was really pulling the strings. But first, William decided, he would give Catherine one chance to tell him the truth voluntarily. He would create a situation where she would have to choose between continuing the deception and being honest about who she really was and what she had been doing. Depending on how she responded, William would decide whether Catherine was a victim being forced to participate in this scheme or a willing conspirator who deserved whatever consequences would follow from his discoveries. William decided to confront Catherine on a Friday evening when they had planned a quiet dinner at his apartment. He spent the entire day rehearsing what he would say and how he would handle her likely denials and explanations. He printed copies of the most damaging documents he had photographed, organizing them in a folder that he hid in his bedroom closet. Catherine arrived at 7 o'clock, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the blue dress that William had once told her was his favorite. She seemed more relaxed than she had been in weeks, laughing and talking about plans for their upcoming weekend. William wondered if she had been told that her assignment was nearly complete, or if something had changed in whatever scheme she was part of. They cooked dinner together, and Catherine was more affectionate than usual, touching his arm while they talked and kissing him softly while they waited for the pasta to cook. William found it difficult to reconcile this warm, loving woman with the calculating operative he now knew she was. Either Catherine was an extraordinary actress, or some part of her feelings for him had become genuine, despite her original deception. After dinner, as they sat on the couch with glasses of wine, William decided it was time to begin his confrontation. He started carefully, not wanting to alert Catherine to the full extent of his knowledge until he could gauge her reactions. "Catherine, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me," William said, setting down his wine glass and turning to face her directly. "Of course," Catherine replied, but William noticed her body language immediately became more guarded. "What is it?" "I went to Mercy General Hospital yesterday to surprise you with lunch, but they told me that no one named Catherine Morrison works there. Can you explain that?" The color drained from Catherine's face, and William could see her mind racing as she tried to formulate a response. For a long moment, she said nothing, just staring at him with wide eyes. There must have been some mistake," she finally said. "Maybe they couldn't find me in their system. Sometimes the computers have problems." "I asked them to check multiple times," William said calmly. "They were very thorough. They said no Catherine Morrison has worked there for at least 5 years. Catherine stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her back to William. He could see her hands shaking as she gripped the windowsill. "Why were you checking up on me?" she asked, and there was an edge to her voice that William had never heard before. "Don't you trust me?" "Should I trust you?" William replied. "Because right now I'm finding it very hard to believe anything you've told me about yourself." Catherine turned around, and William was shocked to see tears streaming down her face. But rather than the tears of someone caught in a lie, these seemed like tears of relief, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You don't understand how complicated this is," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to tell you the truth so many times, but I couldn't. I was scared." "Scared of what?" William asked. "And what truth are you talking about? Who are you, really?" Catherine sat back down, But this time she chose the chair across from William rather than the couch beside him. She wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something she had been dreading. "My name really is Catherine Morrison," she began. "But I'm not a nurse, and I never went to the University of Iowa. I work for a company called Strategic Consulting Services. And for the past 2 years, my job has been to get close to you and learn everything I could about your life." William felt a strange mix of vindication and heartbreak. He had known the truth for several days, but hearing Catherine admit it out loud made it feel more real and more devastating. "Why?" he asked. "Why would anyone want to spy on me? I'm nobody special." "You're not nobody," Catherine said, looking directly at him for the first time since her confession began. "Your work on the Data Vault security system made you a valuable target. There are people who would pay a lot of money for access to that technology, and they thought you might be the easiest way to get it." William realized he had been right about the connection to his work, but the confirmation still felt like a punch to the stomach. "So everything between us was fake? Every conversation, every moment we shared?" "It started that way," Catherine admitted. "I was hired to make you fall in love with me, to get you to trust me completely, and then to find a way to access your work computer or convince you to share information about the Data Vault project." "But," William prompted, sensing there was more to her explanation. "But something happened that I didn't expect," Catherine said, fresh tears beginning to flow. "I actually fell in love with you. Not the fake love I was supposed to perform, but real feelings that I've never experienced before. The more time we spent together, the more I realized I didn't want to complete my assignment." William wanted to believe her, but the betrayal was so complete that he struggled to trust anything she said. "How do I know this isn't just another lie? Another part of your job?" "Because I never gave them what they wanted," Catherine said urgently. "I had dozens of opportunities to access your computer or copy files from your work laptop. I could have installed software to track your communications or convinced you to bring me to your office. But I never did any of those things. I kept making excuses and telling them I needed more time." This information surprised William. If Catherine was telling the truth, it meant she had been protecting him rather than exploiting him, at least partially. But it also raised new questions about what her employers might do when they realized she wasn't completing her mission. "Who are you working for?" William asked. "Who wanted information about my work?" "I don't know exactly," Catherine replied. "Strategic Consulting Services operates like a front company. The people who hire us never identify themselves directly. I was told that the client was a competitor of your company who wanted to develop similar technology, but I suspected it might be something more serious than corporate espionage." William went to his bedroom and retrieved the folder of documents he had copied from Catherine's safe. When he returned, Catherine's face went white as she recognized the papers. "You searched my apartment," she said, but there was no anger in her voice, only resignation. "I had to know the truth," William said, spreading the documents on the coffee table between them. "I found your contract, the fake identification cards, and the detailed file you compiled about my life. Reading that file was like discovering that someone had been studying me like a laboratory rat." Catherine looked at the papers with obvious distress. "I hated writing those reports," she said. "Every time I had to document something personal you shared with me, I felt like I was betraying you. But they required regular updates, and if I didn't provide them, they would have known I was compromising the mission." "So you chose to betray me instead of disobeying them," William said, his anger finally beginning to surface. "You decided that my feelings and my privacy were less important than your job." "No," Catherine said forcefully. "I was trying to protect you. If I had refused the assignment or quit suddenly, they would have found another way to get to you. At least with me, I could control how much damage was done. I kept telling them you were cautious and paranoid, that you never talked about work, that you were impossible to manipulate. I was buying time while I figured out how to get us both out of this situation." William stared at Catherine, trying to decide if he believed her explanation. The evidence suggested she was telling at least partial truth. He had found no indication that she had actually stolen any information from him or his company. But the fundamental betrayal remained. She had built their entire relationship on lies. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" William asked. "If you really cared about me, you could have warned me that I was being targeted." "Because I was afraid you would hate me," Catherine said simply. "And I was afraid of what they might do if they found out I had compromised the operation." "These aren't the kind of people who just fire employees who betray them. I've heard stories about other operatives who tried to quit or expose assignments. Bad things happened to them." "What kind of bad things?" William asked, beginning to understand that Catherine might be in real danger. "People who disappear, who have accidents, who suddenly find themselves facing serious criminal charges for things they didn't do. Strategic Consulting Services has connections that can destroy someone's life in ways that look completely natural and legal." William felt a chill as he realized the scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just corporate espionage or a simple con game. Catherine was describing an organization with the resources and willingness to use serious threats against its own employees. As if summoned by their conversation, Catherine's phone began to ring. She looked at the screen and went pale. "It's them," she said. "They're calling for an update. They've been pressuring me to complete the assignment soon, and I've been running out of excuses for why I haven't accessed your work information yet." "Don't answer it," William said. "I have to," Catherine replied. "If I don't take their calls, they'll know something is wrong." Catherine answered the phone, and William could hear a man's voice on the other end, though he couldn't make out the words. Catherine's responses were short and nervous. "Yes, I understand. I've been working on it. He's very careful about his work. I need a little more time. Yes, I know what the deadline is." When she hung up, Catherine looked terrified. "They want me to get access to your work computer by the end of next week, or they're going to replace me with someone else. They said the client is getting impatient and considering more direct methods." "What does that mean?" William asked. "It means they might try to break into your company's offices, or they might target your colleagues, or they might decide that you're not useful to them anymore." Catherine's voice was shaking. "William, I think we're both in serious danger now." William realized that everything had changed. This was no longer just about his broken heart or Catherine's betrayal. They were both potential victims of people who had shown they were willing to go to extraordinary lengths to get what they wanted. "What do we do?" he asked. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "I have an idea," she finally said, "but it's dangerous, and you'll have to trust me one more time." "I don't know if I can trust you," William said honestly. "I know," Catherine replied, "but if you want to protect yourself and stop these people from targeting someone else the way they targeted you, you're going to have to take that risk." Catherine's plan was bold and dangerous. She would tell her handlers that she had finally gained William's complete trust, and that he had agreed to bring her to his office over the weekend to show her his work on the Data Vault project. This would give them an opportunity to gather evidence about Strategic Consulting Services and their real clients. But first, they would go to the FBI. William's sister Jennifer, the investigative journalist, had contacts in law enforcement who specialized in corporate espionage and cybercrime. If they could convince the authorities to investigate, they might be able to expose the entire operation. As Catherine outlined her plan, William found himself looking at her with new eyes. The woman he had fallen in love with had been largely fictional, but the person sitting across from him now, scared, guilty, but determined to make things right, might be someone he could eventually learn to trust again. The road ahead would be difficult and dangerous. Catherine would have to maintain her deception long enough for the FBI to build a case, while William would have to pretend that he still trusted her completely. They would both be walking a tightrope, knowing that one mistake could cost them their lives. But for the first time since discovering the truth about Catherine, William felt a spark of hope. Maybe their relationship had been built on lies, but their chance to expose the truth and protect others from the same manipulation felt like something real and important. As Catherine collapsed into tears of relief and exhaustion, finally free from the burden of maintaining her elaborate deception, William made a decision. He would help her bring down the people who had used them both as pawns in a game much larger than either of them had understood. The truth had been more painful than William could have imagined, but it had also revealed something unexpected. That even in the midst of elaborate lies and manipulation, genuine human connection could emerge. Whether that would be enough to rebuild their relationship remained to be seen. But it was enough to give them both the courage to fight back against the people who had tried to control their lives. The next phase of their story would be about seeking justice and reclaiming their freedom. But it would also be about discovering who they really were when the lies finally fell away.